finished the first video, and that one just simply covered reference photo and grid lines, nothing too exciting. This one, we're going to be doing the initial sketch. So I'm mostly using just my iPad here. This thing has lasted me for about 9 years. It gets the job done. I simply want to zoom in on it, have those photos. So the first thing I'll start with normally is just kind of counting down and figuring out a starting point, and I just do the initial outline. When I'm getting that outline, I'll find a reference kind of in that square, kind of the top area, and just start to get those proportions in. And all I'm really doing is finding that general outside edge. When you're using your pencil to draw this, you don't want to make it too light and you don't want to make it too dark. If it's too light, it could rub with your hand quite easily and go away. If you make it too dark, it'll be hard to erase and you'll see some of that graphite shine coming through, or you'll put too much of an indent on the paper. With grid lines, the most important thing that I use them for is simply for proportion. The proportion of it is important because if you don't have those, everything will look a little bit off. When it comes to the eyes, it's a pretty tricky area. I'll often blow up my screen to actually scale it to 1 inch and use a ruler and quickly find like the exact proportions. Some other things have a bit of grace, but when it comes to eyes, and I found especially noses and mouths, I find it helpful to really get it actually accurate. So I'll normally find an upper and lower and then to the edge, and from that kind of trace the shape. So in this part here, I'm kind of drawing that like upper brow ridge area that's quite dark on the paper, because not only for outline for the proportions, but also figuring out where on the drawing the like color will shift, the shading will shift, where are the dark areas. It kind of helps you just figure out where that is, so when you're doing your rough base layer to put on that first layer of shading, it's kind of in the right spot. But you can be a bit flexible with these. It's just kind of a rough idea. She has some wild eyebrows. I think that eyebrow hair is probably like 4 inches long. She needs a haircut. Damn. I really wanted to draw her because she's getting old. I think she's about 13 now. She looks pretty ratty. She looks pretty ragged, but I love her. She's cute to me, and that's all that really matters. This nose I had a bit of trouble with. Like, you see me using the ruler. I wanted to draw like a perfect symmetrical shape, but as I was kind of looking at the proportions, it didn't really come across as symmetrical. So my brain was trying to do something perfect. In reality, it was going a little bit off like this. And a technique I hear other artists use sometimes, and I've used it in the past, is when you're doing your outline or a tricky area, put both your reference photo and your grid line upside down. That way it doesn't really look like what you're trying to draw. You're simply drawing a shape instead of a nose at that point, and it kind of helps you make more realistic proportions instead of what your brain thinks should be right, which is often kind of wrong. All in all, I'd say this part of the process, this rough outline, takes 10 to 15 minutes depending on the drawing. Actually, scratch that. It can take closer to like 30 minutes when I did my For Honor Viking drawing there, just because there's so many more little details, whereas with fur it's a bit more forgiving. And this area where she has that edge of really wild fur versus kind of like the actual boundary, I drew both lines in very quickly because I'm going to want to do the shading up to the initial line, but I kind of want to know roughly where that fur goes out to, so when I draw it later, I have an idea of how far to go, what the size is. And then the background for this is going to be a little bit tricky because the feet and tail kind of disappear into the grass. I'm not the strongest with backgrounds as it is. Historically, I've either just done white or completely flat black. So drawing the grass and all the little texture and layering, that's going to be tricky, but I'll figure it out. I'll kind of make it artistic, not realistic, so I don't have as much expectations for myself. And so that's the initial sketch complete. It doesn't look like much right now. From that, we're going to erase the grid lines and just simply take an eraser and get those ones out. I don't erase any of them in the drawing, and I'm not going to erase any of them in the background because I plan to draw over them, layer them, they'll completely disappear. But this area is going to be the sky, and it's going to be mostly white. So I erase over that, and I'll normally use a cotton swab after I blow it off just to get rid of all those little eraser marks. And from this, I'm going to kind of make my first areas of darkness. One area where I used to struggle in was making everything kind of flat, so my dark areas were just kind of a dark gray and my light areas were kind of a light gray. Whereas here, the dark areas, I'm starting at first with a dark black. I'm not going like full on to the paper, but it's getting like a nice baseline color in the really dark areas, and I'll be leaving like the sky white just so there's a lot of contrast, and that helps make drawings look just a bit more appealing to the eye. And when you're doing a slightly softer area and you want to get more a bit lighter and more area at once, just simply like turn the charcoal on the side and kind of just do some nice even strokes, and I find that helps a lot. And now, because of the proportions with the grid line, it's very easy to find where these dark areas are. And this doesn't look like much to begin with, but it'll just be layering. Grid lines, initial sketch, base layer, second base layer, final shading. There's normally 5 steps for me for every single drawing I do. And at this point, this is where it looks the most rough, because I used to draw everything grid line at a time, and it would be really hard to complete the drawing because it was just overwhelming to do. Whereas if I spend just 5 minutes making it look kind of rough, you can only go up from there. And so this is the complete drawing or initial sketch. In the next video, what we'll be doing is doing the shading, be adding a bit more texture, and then I'll start working on the background. Once the background is complete, what I'll do is kind of finish up the face, and that'll be the finished piece. Thanks for watching. I hope this explained my process a little bit. I'm still learning how to do these videos, so again, with the drawing, it'll only get better from here, and it would help me out if you could add a like or subscribe. I will ask for it. I'll even do the fun little caption where it shows up there, and till next time.